This is The Guardian.
Hello, I'm Faye Carruthers and welcome to The Guardian Women's Football Weekly. Deadline day drama as two Lionesses make big moves. We'll discuss the fallout from Chloe Kelly's transfer to Arsenal and Keira Walsh moving to Chelsea. We've got a thriller at the Joy Stadium to dissect, a catch-up on the Championship, and we'll talk about what's going on in Spain. All that, plus we'll take your questions, and that's today's Guardian Women's Football Weekly. Well, what a panel we have today. Suzy Wrack, hello.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. It's been quite a fun week, hasn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. Little bit's gone on.
Yeah, just quiet, Emma Sanders, I'm sure, has just had her feet up, slippers on,
As usual.
Work going on, quiet.
Yeah, I've literally done nothing all week. It's been great. Not.
Yeah. Chris Paouros as well, God, you never do anything, do you?
I've just been lounging about for the week as well.
I tell you what, I am loving the luminous green ensemble you are wearing today. Where are your glow sticks? I'm getting proper 90s rave vibes.
Well, sometimes on a gloomy morning, you want to wake up and decide, today I'm going to direct traffic.
Brilliant. Right, direct some of this traffic for us because at 11 o'clock on Thursday evening in the UK, the transfer window finally closed after one of the most dramatic deadline days to date. Went down to the wire. A few surprises along the way as well. Barcelona accepting an offer from Chelsea for midfielder Keira Walsh, and Chloe Kelly finally forcing a move out of Manchester City and arriving at Arsenal. We're going to go through the kind of nitty-gritty in a second, Suzy, but how do you sum up this transfer window?
Exciting. It's been dramatic and slightly chaotic, and I think it's the first time where I thought this feels a little bit like a men's transfer window in terms of particularly for January, in terms of big players moving and big money being spent and proper strengthening. It feels like there's a little bit of a shift towards business being done in this window in a way that there hasn't necessarily been before. I mean, don't get me wrong, there have been big deals done, but not maybe to the extent that there have before.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, let's go through it all, shall we? Because for about an hour on Wednesday, it looked like Keira Walsh was going to be the story of deadline day, but the Chloe Kelly saga ended up dominating. In case you missed it, I'll give you a rundown of what happened on Wednesday night. We read from Chloe Kelly on social media. It's a long one, bear with me. A message from me. For a long time, I've tried to work through professional challenges privately, not commenting publicly. But with my situation increasingly being debated in the public domain, I feel it's time to be open and transparent, and that you heard it from my perspective. A key lesson I've learned in my life is that whilst I can't control someone's negative behaviour towards me, I can control how long I'm prepared to tolerate it. From day one, I felt so much love from my teammates and the fans. With my contract expiring in June, I've accepted my future is not at this club beyond then. With the Euros fast approaching, this summer is a huge one, and I want to be in a position to give it my best shot to represent my country, something which has always filled me with such pride and is a true honour to do. However, to be dictated whom I can and can't join with only 4 months left of the football season is having a huge impact on not only my career but my mental well-being. The situation has dragged on too long, it's disappointing and not right. I'm at a pivotal point in my life and my career is so important to me, and it's very disappointing that the sport we love can make you feel this way, especially after there's been so much growth. This is why I'm posting this, because I want you all to be aware that we as players dedicate our lives to our sport and our clubs, but dreams can be crushed whilst we live in silence. I'm human, and I have and will give everything to the game that I love. Ultimately, I just want to be happy again. So that was a statement from Chloe Kelly. Reports then followed that Manchester United and Brighton were interested throughout deadline day, until reports then came through that Arsenal had had an offer of a loan move accepted by City, which was eventually confirmed at 11 o'clock on Thursday night. But then there was more. It continues. Kelly released another statement saying, "So disappointed to find out tonight that people at the club are briefing journalists against me if I'm to sign at a club before the window shuts. They've called reporters to assassinate my character and tried to plant negative stories about me in the football media." I mean, wow. I always feel uncomfortable when things are played out in the public domain like this. However, it feels as if she had no choice but to play it out in the public domain. It was a really dramatic end to everything, Emma. What do you make of it? I'll ask you what she's going to add to Arsenal in a minute, but let's go through let's go through all of that first.
Yeah, I mean, it was wild, really, wasn't it? The whole process. I think there's so many different narratives and facets to this, isn't there? I think, firstly, Chloe Kelly's point of view, it's important that she got her point of view across, and she was able to do that. We don't get to see that often. I always applaud players who speak out and speak up for themselves. Whether or not you agree with what she put or not, I think is kind of irrelevant, because it's, you know, like I say, it's all about her sort of sharing her side of view and her point of view. So I think that was made quite clear. She obviously wasn't happy there. She obviously wanted to move away. She felt she wasn't getting the opportunity to do that. So if it means putting pressure on the club in a public sense, and that's obviously the decision that she went down. Obviously, the club themselves chose not to release any public statement. Obviously, there was, you know, that talk from Chloe there about there being reports off record to journalists. Obviously, I won't comment on that. But I think the fact there wasn't anything publicly from Man City, I think, was quite poor. If there were briefings, then it's not the way to go about it. I think if you want to directly address anything that Chloe Kelly said, I think you have to do that publicly. To ask, journalists to do that off record and to report as their understanding, as was claimed by Chloe, then I think that's just not, you can't do that. It's defamation of character for anyone in the media to do that. So, any person that's a journalist would be breaking the law. So that in itself was just not, clubs can't be doing that. So there was just a lot going on, I think, in the situation. I think in the end, the outcome is the absolute right one, is that Chloe Kelly has moved. Manchester City have obviously been able to release a player that clearly wasn't happy. All parties have sort of ended their relationship now. Yes, it's a loan move, but Chloe Kelly is not going back to Manchester City when her contract ends in the summer. There's absolutely no chance of that happening. So hopefully she'll go to Arsenal. Like you say, we'll come on to talk about what she can provide there, but certainly she gets, a new environment, some new energy. She's around a lot of the Lionesses as well. It's a club she's played at before. The fans seemed, on board. They seemed pretty happy to welcome her in. So I think from her perspective, it's all big ticks in the boxes, isn't it? And I think from Gareth Taylor's perspective this week, it's quite clear that I think he wants to move on from the whole situation.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he does. We don't really see this much in the women's game, Chris, do we? But it feels as if player power is actually coming to the fore. Social media we've spoken about before. People can own their own narratives. Was it the right thing that she did?
I think she had to. I think we've got to remember that there's sort of humanity at the core of all of this, and I appreciate that, we're talking about a transfer deadline day and the transfer, what you're transferring are the assets, which are the players. But regardless of that, she said it herself, it's affecting her career, affecting her mental health. And, as I say, there's sort of humanity at the centre of it. And it doesn't happen very much in women's football. You rarely see women players force moves, and, you hear it sort of behind the scenes as well, that if someone's contract's going to run out, even if they do want to leave, they might sort of say, well, I'll just wait and see what happens rather than forcing something. But I think January is the time to do that, particularly, and contracts are short in women's football, and all of those things that we know, they all sort of build to the same thing, which is like, you've got a short contract. What does that mean about where your value is anyway? So if there's something that you need to do to say, I have to force something for what's right for me and my life, I think that's really important. She clearly wants to play and she backed herself, and I think that's to be lauded rather than denigrated.
I mean, playing devil's advocate ever so slightly in that, I feel like the club dictating where you go, like, that's the nature of football, right? Like, a club doesn't want you to go to a big rival. That is a pretty standard thing, men's and women's. But having said that, clearly there's been such a incredible breakdown in relations. Like, you've driven her to that point, right? Like, as a club, you've allowed relations to become so untenable, and it's reached a point where the scorer of the winning goal in a Euros final is now still in the peak age of her career, is wondering whether she's even going to make the next Euros. Like, you've engineered that to the extent that you have no right to dictate anymore. So, like, there's, you know, if they were still looking after her as a player, having an holistic view of the club, going out and finding her a good club that is going to help her win her Euros place back because they don't see her fitting into the team anymore, fine. But if you're treating her the way you're treating her, to the point at which there was clearly, you know, a really dramatic fallout. You could just see that in all the players liking the tweets, the post on Instagram, and commenting and wishing her best of luck, including her own teammates at City. That clearly things have broken down to such an extent that City had absolutely no right to have any say on where she was going. So, like, slight devil's advocate in that, like, obviously, you know, a club has every right not to sell a player to their nearest rival if they don't want to, but they had lost any right for that to be the case, in my view, in this circumstance, because they had, you know, kind of soured relations so significantly.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Susie. I think that's not necessarily devil's advocate there. It's like, that's what the reality is. But there was clearly just some really bad management there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think there's, you know...
Welcome to the world, Chris.
I know, but it doesn't have to be like that, Faye. It doesn't have to be like that. Imagine.
It does not, for sure. I tell you what, let's talk when we talk the game, because obviously, in strange quirks of fate in football, of course Manchester City were playing Arsenal at the weekend in the Barclays WSL. So let's talk about what Chloe Kelly can bring to Arsenal when we talk about the game. Let's continue focusing on deadline day, because, you know, there had been rumours about Keira Walsh leaving Barcelona for quite a while. We thought she might be heading to Arsenal. Plenty of interest from them, but it was eventually Chelsea who got her signature, and it's been a really statement window from the Blues, hasn't it, Susie, this January? What is Keira Walsh going to add to a team which, I mean, doesn't really need her in the nicest way possible? You know what I mean? They've got a lot of quality already.
Yeah, a lot of quality, but not really in that position, so to speak. Like, I mean, if you think Sophie Ingle was their, like, probably most natural defensive midfielder, and has obviously done her ACL. So, and then when you're looking at sort of natural replacements for her, they don't really have one. And obviously they've got players that can fill the role. Erin Cuthbert, but can play a bit deeper and things like that. But it's not a like natural position for her. So in a sense, like, I would say it's like one of the weakest areas of their starting 11 if you're being really, really pedantic, which when you're trying to win the Champions League, you've got to be that pedantic over, right? Like, yes, you're maybe cruising in the Women's Super League and the cups and things without too much problem, without any deficiency in that area being exposed. But when you're going into the knockout stages of Champions League, that's when those little details really are going to matter. So in that sense, like, I think she's like a really shrewd acquisition and needed for them. But the fact that Arsenal didn't get her, having gone in with a reported world record bid in like September, and then she goes to Chelsea in January for like what looks like less than half the price of what Arsenal bid in the summer, is outstandingly bad business from an Arsenal point of view. And I just, yeah, I mean, I think Chelsea are just absolutely, you know, obviously having recruited Germa, like completely bossing the narrative and setting the standard, and yes, inflating the market. But the thing is like, if other clubs aren't willing to inflate the market, then a team like Chelsea will, and then you're chasing in that inflated market anyway. So you've sort of got to be pushing the boundaries in a system which I think is shit, don't get me wrong. Like, I don't think ridiculous transfer fees and pay should be a thing in women's football necessarily, that just spirals and spirals and spirals and becomes like the men's game. I think there should be caps at the bottom and at the top and things like that. But in this current state of a transfer world we're living in, Chelsea are utterly controlling the price of milk in in every single scenario, and everyone else is scrabbling the pennies together to get the to the new price.
We talked a little bit about this, Emma, last week in terms of whether or not spending needs to be controlled. Friend of the pod, Anita Asante, said on the BBC she thought it was actually on the other clubs to up their investment. Where do you stand on it?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that because, like Suzy touched on there, if other clubs aren't willing to invest, I think it's a dangerous precedent to then, flip it on the other side and say the club that is investing is the bad guy. I completely understand it's not as black and white as that. Naturally, as Suzy says, they're inflating the market. That makes it tougher for everyone else in the league. It widens the gap. But Chelsea haven't just invested in player transfer fees. They've got a very good wellbeing programme. They've got a lot of support staff at the club. They could probably do with investing in the facilities a little bit more, but it's not like they haven't invested at all. They've got great medical facilities. Obviously, they invested in arguably one of the world's best coaches. So it's not like they've just gone out and brought a load of players and then not invested elsewhere. They're investing around as well. And I think for me, that is really, really important, that you're not just spending stupid money on players and not investing on, the holistic approach to kind of the support network around the players. So I think that is an important note because it means that Chelsea are investing full stop, not just buying players. So if I was other clubs, I'd be looking at that and thinking, okay, Brighton are a great example of a club that are doing it the right way. They've invested in the facilities. They're looking to build a purpose-built stadium. They've just started investing in terms of transfer fees in players. So they've done it that right way as well, build the infrastructure and then invest in players. And it just takes time. So I think clubs realise it takes time. The problem is everyone's reacted so slowly, you could argue, that Chelsea have already got this gap. So is that the problem? Is it the system's problem? I think it's probably both. But I think Chelsea spending money, I think is really difficult to criticise because the opportunity is there for them. If no one else is doing it, then why should they be stopped doing it? And I think it's too early in the women's game to bring in financial constraints at the moment. Just because clubs are investing, the model's changing all the time. The business is changing all the time. We're just starting to attract sponsorships and commercial rights and all this kind of things. I think just putting caps on things now, I just think there's a potential for it to sort of, I suppose, to slow down any progress.
Put the reins on a little bit. More broadly across the January transfer window, Chris, any other deals stand out for you in particular? Obviously, those two, took all the headline. Anyone else who you'll be keeping an eye on?
Well, I think obviously I look at I think Spurs have made some 3 good signings, but I would say that. But, I saw Tom Gary there was a quote about something how we're not shopping in the same supermarket as some of our London neighbours, but we're steadily improving our squad, which I think is probably about right. Lisa Kopp from Leicester, she was obviously going to be going somewhere else and already looks really well settled. Olivia Holt, I think once she's fit, is going to be sort of that creative spark that we need, sort of, being that sort of metronome, but also producing things in the midfield. And Josephine Rebrink is a centre back, but played at 6 at the weekend and looked quite tidy. I think Gago at Everton, sorry if that's not how you say her name, it was a good signing and showed us that at the weekend. So I think there's some interesting, the game has been upped. I think for a January window, I think Suzy said it earlier, it was, but you could sort of see how there have been a few injuries and the bar is being raised. And we've just talked about the bar being raised by Chelsea there. And so actually you're thinking, okay, how do I get in players that are going to be effective in the WSL? Where do I look if I can't afford to spend $1 million on Naomi Girma, who, by the way, as much as it pains me, it's very exciting to see her in the WSL. What a player she is, and to be able to sort of see her on a weekly basis is going to be a real privilege. On the Chelsea stuff, I mean, I'm sorry to go back to it, but I want to play devil's advocate slightly. And on the one hand, I agree with everything that Emma just said, right? But on the other hand, I just worry whether it's setting the standard or whether it's unrealistic. Because I don't want to hold women's football to a higher standard to say, actually, we don't want to get into the mess that men's football's got into financially. But we know what a fragile state the women's game is, even at the top level. So at any moment, because you've got the same clubs that are making all these sort of enormous financial investments, if you like, in the men's game, it's at any moment you're like, okay, well, actually, we think the women's football's jumped the shark. We're not going to invest anymore. Then what? So there's something about how you do make that sustainable. I don't know what the answer is because, on the one hand, I think yes, actually there should be some cost controls, but then equally, it's like why are we putting cost controls on women and not? So again, it's like it swims around my head. Having said all of that, as a punter, you just love the kind of drama and the mayhem and spending loads of money and thinking about the amazing things that you can then go and sort of do on a football pitch. So I constantly oscillate with this question. But yeah, there's some really exciting things. And as I say, I think the next one I think is Gago at Everton. There are a couple of others, but I think, if anything, Chelsea definitely won the transfer window. And I don't think there's any doubt in that.
Yeah, I just wanted to just build on what Chris was saying there about Gargo going to Everton. I thought she was a brilliant signing.
Is it Gago or Gargo? Have we decided yet?
I've heard it's Gargo, but I don't know.
I'll go with you, Emma. You know better than I do. Let's say Gargo.
I wouldn't say that. But yeah, I think she's a great signing. I was there when she made her debut against Aston Villa, and she came on as a substitute for the last 20 minutes and absolutely ripped the place up. So I think it's 3 goals in 3 games now in all competitions, maybe 3 goals in 4 games. So, I mean, she's had a brilliant start. But on the Everton theme, my signing of the transfer window, aside from Keira Walsh and Naomi Girma, still remains Hayley Ladd to Everton. I just think that was such a brilliant move for both her and the club.
Brilliant. That's deadline day wrapped up for another January at least. It starts all again in the summer. How exciting.
Worst month of my life.
Oh no, Em, you've done brilliantly. Honestly, there's been so much to unpick this time, and so much to unpick in this game as well, because it's time to look at the weekend's action in the Barclays WSL. Manchester City against Arsenal, written in the stars, isn't it? They love just to help us with our jobs, don't they? The fixture schedulers. Chloe Kelly, obviously ineligible for this fixture, but no shortage of drama on the pitch. We were treated to a riveting 7-goal thriller, and it finished Manchester City 3, Arsenal 4. The Gunners raced into a 2-0 lead. Goals from Mariona Caldente. Was it like 28 seconds she scored? And Lotta Vuben-Moy as well on the score sheet for the first time in nearly a year. Mary Fowler pulled one back for the hosts before half-time, before Vivian Miedemar inevitably struck once more against her former club. Parity for no more than a minute, though. Frida Marnham restored Arsenal's lead from the restart before a contentious Mary Fowler penalty levelled the score again with just 4 minutes later. The eventual winner, though, came from none other than Stina Blackstenius, which means Arsenal go above Gareth Taylor's side in the table. It was a real classic, Susie, wasn't it? What are your reflections on the game?
Yeah, end-to-end stuff, and nice to watch it just as a fan. We had Tom covering it, so I actually got to, not in person, but watch it on the telly, and I can't remember the last time I actually got to do that, and everyone will be glad that they weren't sat next to me in a press box for that game. But yeah, thrilling. I mean, City's defensive woes after losing Alex Greenwood to injury just pile up, don't they? And the confusion for the opening goal, really, really poor. It's not totally Keating's fault. She's played into trouble there big time, but it's not good, and they need to spend a lot of time on the training pitch working out how they shore things up at the back. I think rotating the goalkeepers can't be that helpful either. I know they're sort of doing. I know Gareth Taylor said that Keating had edged it in training, a sort of ahead of the game kind of thing. That I don't think that's okay, though. I think you've got to pick a number one and back them. And the fact that there have been quite big errors in this game and in the game against Man United, you just can't have those mistakes. I think the result was fair in the end, especially given the penalty decision was absolutely appalling. But a thrilling game, and I don't know about everyone else, but I just wanted a result either way, because I mean, it's bad enough that Chelsea are already completely running away with the league. Like if it had been a draw and they had pulled a couple more points clear at the top again, it just would have been so bad. So yeah, City or Arsenal winning, like I just whenever I say whenever, when the score was level for a brief moment, I was just like praying for another goal because I just didn't want it to end in a draw.
No, I don't think any of us did. Certainly not Gareth Taylor, but equally he didn't want to be on the end of another defeat as well. The injury crisis that they've had, loss of form, all the fallout from the Chloe Kelly story and the build-up to the match. It wasn't the best preparation at all. And, you know, he said after the game his side needed a pick-me-up and that the mood isn't great. Should he be under a lot of pressure, Emma?
I think so. I think those things that you've listed are valid excuses, valid reasons, but have we been giving those excuses for too long now? You know, Gareth Taylor became Manchester City manager in May 2020. They've not won a WSL title. They've spent a lot of money. Chelsea, up until you could argue the last 12 months, haven't really spent anything excessively on top of what Manchester City have. And apart from last season, I think it's really important to say, obviously, Manchester City absolutely went toe-to-toe, only missed out on the title on goal difference. Could the conversation have been different if they'd won the WSL title then? Yes, absolutely. But the fact of the matter is they didn't. So, you know, how much time can you really keep giving Gareth Taylor? You know, all big clubs get injuries. All big teams have key injuries. You look at Chelsea's injury list that they've had for a long period now. It's terrifying. And what they've gone and done is gone to the market and recruited players, and they've recruited very well. Yes, they brought in the big names, Naomi Goma and Keira Walsh in January, but you look at their summer spending, a lot of the players were younger players, maybe ones that we hadn't heard of as much. You look back to last season when they brought in, Soik Nuskin, what a signing she was. They're very, very good at scouting players. I would argue, you know, I know we discussed this the last time I was on the podcast, Manchester City's recruitment, I just think it's a little bit, you know, all over the shop. It's a bit confusing. So I think a lot of that is led by Gareth Taylor, from what I can understand. Obviously, there's people around him, but I do think he has a big say in who leaves a club and who comes. I know we've discussed before the amount of players that have left. And when you look at that goalkeeping situation, you know, they allowed Ellie Roebuck to leave. She was a former England #1, Great Britain #1 at the Olympics at such a young age. Clearly a fantastic goalkeeper. Was she perfect? Absolutely not. Did she make mistakes? 100%. But is she better than the other two that they have? I think absolutely yes. So just a lot of questionable things have happened. And Gareth Taylor is the manager, therefore he's the one who's fronting everything. So should he be under pressure? My answer is yes.
Let's go a bit more positive, shall we, Chris? Mariona Caldente, she was great, wasn't she? Probably flown under the radar a little bit as well, particularly when she's in the Spain squad and when she was at Barcelona. But she's added quite a lot to this Arsenal side, I feel.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, Arsenal fans were sort of, you know, lamenting over the summer with letting Miedemar go. But I think the reason they let her go, as I understand it, for budgetary reasons, to get Caldente in. And what a player. I mean, you know, she, you know, you could argue there was chaos for the first goal, but was it also great pressing from her? She played a terrific goal for the fifth goal, and and then just everything, like an incredible crossfield ball for the last one. She's got it all. I've just talked about a press. I've just talked about a through ball. I've just talked about a crossfield ball. And she seems also, which is a good favourite of mine, to sort of play all with a wry smile on her face. It's like, yeah, I know how good, almost like watching the ball as it flies through the air. It's like, yeah, that was a great pass, which you kind of like when you're good. It's all right to be proud of yourself. And so, yeah, I think she had a really, really good game and is a really top player. Is what they needed. Sadly, as much as I hate to admit it.
You mentioned, Suzy, the penalty. I think I'm not even going to ask any of you what you will think. I'm sure Cheryl Foster will be disappointed. Clearly, when Fagino went down under a challenge from Steph Catley, it was outside of the box. It didn't continue inside the box. And obviously what we get then is the inevitable calls for VAR. Is that actually the solution?
No, good refereeing is the solution for me. Like, I'm not being funny, but the lines person is like really close to that. The referee's in a good position. She's like, it's not even tight. She's really far out the box. And also, I mean, I suppose you can see it given as a foul. She's moving at quite high speed, but the touch on her back is minimal as well. So even that I think is slightly contentious in and of itself that it's even a foul. But you give it based on the fact that, yeah, like I say, she's moving at speed. But
It was a foul, Susie. It was a foul.
it was like so lightly brushed her. Like, I mean, when you watch the replay, it is so like faint. And I'll give it because, like I say, at speed, even the smallest touch can impact your movement. But like, yeah, I mean, for me, like giving it when it is so obviously outside the box is just like unforgivable. And yes, VAR would change that, but like good refereeing would change that, and that for me is the bigger thing. Like it was just a terrible decision, and it felt like it was maybe influenced by reaction rather than like actually using their eyes, because everyone watching it, like in the stadium and at home, were very much like that was outside the box, like it, and they're closer to the action.
So actually the first time she can play, because she's also cup tied for the FA Cup 5th round match against London City Lionesses, is in the North London derby, which I can see Chris Paouros getting not so excited about now, shaking her head.
She'll be so like up for it. It'll be unbelievable.
I know. Which will be a week on Sunday if she comes into the team. Susie, what is she going to bring?
Oh, I mean, well, like, it's a good question because she's not played for so long that she may well be a little bit rusty. Obviously, she's been training and stuff, but, she's been such a bit part player for City, just coming off the bench at best, left out the squad entirely at times. They might take her a little bit of time to get going. That said, like, after she came back from her ACL injury, probably one of the shortest recoveries that we've seen a player make to have such a big impact at the Euros. Like, it's highly likely that she'll want to get off the mark very, very quickly and have an impact straight away and really prove a point and make a statement to both City and to Serena, who has backed her despite her not playing for this length of time. She's really, really, really going to want to fight for that place in Switzerland. So, it's a great signing for Arsenal in that they're getting a player who is desperately hungry to do well, right? And it's interesting in that, it gives England and Arsenal a little bit of a headache in, kind of Beth Mead, Chloe Kelly battling it out for, that position wide right. So you're sort of, you're really kind of getting a top level player, peak age, and, with a point to prove and some real hunger and desire to do well. So, like, taking her on loan is a no-brainer, right? Like, you would sign her for, you would sign her permanently if you could, I guess. It's a really kind of fortunate timed signing for Arsenal in terms of, like, the type of player and the desire that she's going to feel.
Right, that's it for part 1. In part 2, we're going to look at the rest of the weekend's action. Welcome back to part 2 of the Guardian Women's Football Weekly. So Everton put their recent tribulations in front of goal to bed with a comfortable victory over Leicester, lifting them into 8th. It finished Everton 4, Leicester City 1, thanks to a brace from new signing Kelly Gargo and strikes from Katja Snoys and Honaka Hayashi. Shannon O'Brien got on the score sheet for the Foxes, but it feels, Emma, as if Everton have found their form in front of goal. We mentioned her earlier on. Was Kelly Gargo the missing piece of the puzzle?
I think so, among, a couple of other little pieces as well. I think, firstly, it's just really great to see Everton actually, finding their feet again, having had such a tough couple of seasons, no investment, serious injury crisis, and not being able to do anything about it. Now they have had that investment, they've got the new ownership, they've brought in the new players, and they're making a difference. So, I think Gargo is a brilliant signing from what I've seen so far. Like I mentioned earlier, she really excited me in that on her debut, and everything I've seen from her since. She's got a great goal scoring record anyway, but you never know how that will translate into the WSL. So far, signs are very good. But look, let's be honest, Everton were at home against a Leicester side who have struggled to score this season. They've, obviously they got that win at Liverpool and the draw at Chelsea. But other than that, they've struggled for results and goals. So this is a game that Everton should be winning. They would fancy themselves to be winning if they want to be clear of that relegation zone, which they are, I would think now. So yeah, it was in their favour, but they did it in some style and they looked pretty comfortable. So good times for them. I'd be excited if I was an Everton fan.
Yeah, except, more bad news on the injury front. It was announced on Friday that their captain, Megan Finnegan, had suffered an ACL injury. We obviously wish Megan all the best. A big loss for them, but they did recruit former Chelsea defender Maren Mjelde on deadline day, which is a great signing. Disappointing day for Leicester, Chris. They're just 3 points above Crystal Palace in 11th now. And I feel as if Omandi Mikel's going to be a bit frustrated maybe at their lack of consistency at the minute.
I think so. And I think, they pulled it back. They went 1-0 down and then pulled it back to 1-1. So I guess if you were a Leicester fan, you were like, OK, we're back in this game. And then Everton just turned it around in the second half, didn't they? So I think it's a tough one. I mean, last time I was on here, I was sort of saying that I don't think Palace are going to go down. I'm still wondering whether Leicester are going to be the ones that suffer this season. And I think, a game like that could probably be a sort of a seminal moment, but I guess we'll see.
Manchester United and their fifth straight WSL victory with a narrow win over Tottenham on Sunday night. That sent them back up to second. It finished Tottenham 0, Manchester United 1. It was a superb first half volley from Elizabeth Turland, Suzy. And, the game might have been played at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, but it certainly didn't really live up to the majesty of its surroundings, did it? Any major concerns for United, or is victory all that matters?
I mean, ultimately, victory is all that matters, right? Like, they've got a really, really strong defensive record. Yeah, it's the best in the league, isn't it? Still, yeah, just. And the finish for the goal was really, really lovely. But I mean, other than that, there was very little to say about the game. I thought, watching it back, incredibly dull game overall. I feel sorry for Chris watching back-to-back Spurs games. But what was it? I'm curious to know what Chris thought it was like from the stands, because watching it back, I found it incredibly tedious to get to. It felt like time wasted of my life.
Well, I think, when you're a fan, you get into whatever the narrative is that's happening, right? So, of course, the narrative was, I've never heard a player be booed as roundly as Celine Bizet was.
Yes.
And actually, she loved it by the looks of things. Saw her interview later. She was like, it's because they love me and they miss me. So actually, she took it. And it was quite pantomime. So she took it in the spirit in which I guess it was intended. Look, it was quite a dry game. I guess I would say this, but I don't think we could completely deserve the loss, because it was, that was the only moment in the game, exactly as you've just set out there. And it was quite cagey. I guess from a Spurs fan perspective, quite positive signs that we're not being, weren't completely bullied by them. Because, you go one down after 6 minutes and you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen here? But it's frustrating that we continue not to get any reward against Manchester United. We've never beaten them. But, Maya Letizia, really just completely bossed that game. She literally won everything. Although our centre-backs, I thought, did really well. It was the best game I've ever seen Claire Hunt play. Little fact about Claire Hunt, which is that she wears her hair in a ponytail when training and in a bun during a game. So if you ever watch any training videos, her hair's in a pony and it's in a bun at a game. You heard it here first.
Is that a superstition?
I mean, I guess it must be, right? Because I don't know what or maybe just because if you're in a game, you don't want to be fiddling about with your hair, right? So you just want it to sort of jam it in place once.
I might do that when I go to work. Wear it so in a ponytail when I'm doing the Guardian Weekly podcast. Wear it in a bun when I go to work.
There you go. Just to illustrate the difference.
I love the fact you don't see us as work. I love that. That's what I took out of that.
And the one last thing I would say is that my optimism says that we had them worried, because you rarely see Ella Toone at a corner flag with 6 minutes to go. And at 90 minutes, they were fiddling around in the corners. So there you go. Trying to find the positives in everything, Faye,
I love that. It's brilliant. Not much to find positively in the next fixture either, I'm afraid. Crystal Palace, though, did take home a vital point from Derby Day in Crawley against Brighton. It finished Brighton 1, Crystal Palace 1. A bad error from goalkeeper Milamaj Majasari saw Lily Woodham's back pass hit the back of the net, putting Brighton ahead. The hosts were then reduced to 10 in the second half. Maisie Simmons saw a straight red. Palace left it late but equalised in the 88th minute. Through a Mai Kato finish. Laura Kaminsky praised her side's character and resilience. Could be a really important point for them as well in their fight to avoid relegation. Dario Vidosic, though, was frustrated with the refereeing decisions in this game. Emma, did he have a point, or should he be actually really putting the mirror up a little bit more at their lack of creativity? They only just had 3 shots on target.
Yeah, probably a bit of both. I mean, I didn't see the challenge live, so I think whenever you see pictures or replays and it's slowed down, it's difficult really to make a decision. I think it was a rough challenge, whether or not there were more in the game, which was kind of his argument that if that was a red card, then there should have been several others. I can't really comment on too much, to be honest, because I didn't watch the entire 90 minutes.
By the sounds of it, you saved yourselves 90. You saved yourself 90 minutes.
Exactly.
I think sometimes there just needs to be more honesty on the pod. That some games are just terrible and they don't deserve too much analysis. That is for the technical teams to do back at base. So yes, and actually, producer Sophie says, having sat through it live, I concur. So there you go. Maybe we should just stop talking about it. And apologies, Brighton and Crystal Palace fans, if you don't feel like we've done your teams justice, just send us a message. It's absolutely fine. Equally, if you sat through it at the weekend, tell us if you agree with us or not, or give us the positives, bearing in mind we're finding positives in this pod today. A positive for Sonia Bonpastor, Chelsea earning their 12th win of the season with a narrow 1-0 victory away at Villa Park. The Blues continuing that incredible run of form. But it was an unfortunate own goal from Sarah Mailing in the 82nd minute that handed them the 3 points. And Sonia Bonpastor admitted it was a really lucky victory. This is what she had to say. When you're not able to perform at 100%, you always have to find a way to win the game. And the best teams have the power to do that. Look, I mean, really disappointing from an Aston Villa point of view, Suzy, wasn't it? But equally, Chelsea had to put themselves kind of in those positions and force defenders into mistakes for it to happen, which makes them champions ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, the sign of champions is grinding out the results when you're not necessarily playing your best, and that's what Chelsea are really, really good at. It wasn't necessarily like a thrilling example of their football. I thought Aston Villa played incredibly well. I thought Lucy Parker was brilliant, and it was a really well-organised defensive shift from them. But yeah, that little bit of luck, you put the ball into a dangerous position. Sort of Mailing has to get a touch on it because the forward is just behind her. So you can't blame them too much, like Villa too much for the own goal. Like, it's sort of kind of, she's got to get something on it, and obviously directs it into her own net, which is unfortunate. But if it's gonna go in anyway with the player just behind her, then it is what it is. But yeah, I'm just Chelsea march on, right? Like, it's sort of, you kind of, Chelsea going to win the league. I sort of want the gap to be reduced just for the sake of us being able to maintain any kind of argument that this is a really competitive league, and that is not another sort of League One in France or La Liga in Spain where Barcelona and Lyon run away with it with 2 competitive games a year or something. I just really don't want that to become the narrative here, but I feel like increasingly that is what is happening, because ultimately, to be a team that is going to challenge for the Champions League like Lyon and Barcelona, you have to have a squad that is basically going to completely walk it in the league and be able to fight on multiple fronts in various competitions, to be able to have a team that is fit and ready and strong enough to compete in the Champions League. So I feel like it's inevitable at this stage, but I just really want the gap to close more.
Did you hear a friend of the pod, Robin Cowan, who, by the way, is hosting the Guardian Football Weekly this week, if you want to tune in and listen to their pods. Our brother, our sister pod, I don't really know how we describe the team. Sibling, like it. That's better. Non-gender specific. Our sibling over on, still on the same pod feed. Oh God, I've fudged that. Anyway, Robin's on the Guardian Football Weekly. Go and listen to her. And she said the line that she'd mentioned on the pod before. There's nothing more inevitable than death, taxes, and Chelsea winning. She obviously is a commentator and put it much more articulately than I just did. It was the first game in charge for Aston Villa manager Natalia Arroyo, though. Chris, what did you make of her managerial debut?
Thought she did really well, and actually it nearly caused a massive upset. It would have been interesting, considering exactly what Suzy's just said, if Hanson's goal had gone in. I mean, like, that was some strike, and it just hit the crossbar. And what would have changed in the narrative? If Chelsea had lost their first game, it was Arroyo's first game in the WSL. They were very close. It must have been quite an upsetting way to finish. And I think she said at the end of it, it was cruel, but very much a welcome to the league. So I guess she understands where she's landed. My other thought on this game, and I don't know what your take on this is, what did we think of the beige kit?
I love it.
I wonder, do you know what? I wonder if it's quite on trend. At Christmas, we took our nieces to Brandy Melville. I'd never heard of it before they went on about it. Do you know what Brandy Melville is?
Sounds like a little village.
It's a brand for like 16 to 24-year-olds. And it's the shop in Covent Garden we went to, and everything was beige. Everything. And it was just full of teenagers buying like little beige t-shirts and beige vests. So I just wondered if that was part of the kind of Brandy Melville kind of trajectory that Chelsea are in this beige kit.
For someone rocking fluorescent, it's a bold thing to happen.
All right, fair.
I'm trying to look. Like when you go in and you're like picking paints. No, I'm going to say, I'm not going to say the brand. I was going to say a brand where they have like bonkers names for paints, as if I use that brand. I do not. And I'm also not going to say it on the pod. But I want to know, like sometimes they come up. So like the England men's kit, the away kit for the Euros was called Raisin. The colour of it was raisin. I'm trying to find out what Chelsea's...
Cobham cream.
Cobham cream? Is that
I've just made it up. No, I totally made it up.
You have another career, Chris Paouros, in naming paint colours. I love it. Anyway, if anybody knows the official colour of Chelsea's beige kit, please let us know. I might have to just contact the team at Chelsea and ask them, because these are the kind of things that I get quite obsessed with. Anyway, the last game that we need to dissect is Liverpool 1, West Ham 0. Matt Beard's side getting the better of West Ham for the second time in 5 days and getting back to winning ways in the league as well. Leanne Kiernan scoring against her former club. It was quite a tight game actually at St Helens, but Liverpool are now unbeaten in their last 4 WSL home encounters with West Ham. They'd beaten them 5-0 in the FA Cup in midweek as well, which might have given them the edge coming into this, Emma.
Yeah, probably. I think I actually forgot there was one more game, by the way. I was quite enjoying the colour chat. I think it's Liverpool's first back-to-back win at home in the WSL this season, isn't it? Which I think was really important for them, because since that move, they've probably struggled to settle a little bit at St Helens. Prenton Park used to be a real fortress for them. So yeah, it's been a difficult season for them. And after that result against Leicester, I think they really needed this result, because you look at their next fixtures: Man City, Palace away, Man United, Arsenal. So pray for Liverpool is what I would say.
Pray for Liverpool. Suzy, before I get you to drop some really important breaking news onto the pod, talk to me about West Ham. Failed to register a shot on target. This is a problem now for them, isn't it? And Rhiannon Skinner.
Oh, yeah, huge problem. If they hadn't have got the 2 wins in the last 5 games, like, they would be in real serious trouble, and you would be really worrying about them. We said it, was it last week when we said that they've got real talent in their squad? in terms of, obviously players like Kat Gorey and Vivian Asai and things like that. So the quality is there for them to carve out chances and create. The fact that they've got 14 goals shows that they can create and score, but they have to be doing it on a consistent basis if they're wanting to ensure their survival and really be fighting in that sort of middle of the table bunch. They're obviously 5 points above Crystal Palace at the bottom, so they're a way off, but you can't have games that you're kind of really struggling with that regularly. It's a big blow to lose to a team who you should be competing with a little bit better.
I mean, I don't disagree with what Suzy's saying about the talent in the squad, but could you argue that Liverpool's, Everton's squads, Tottenham certainly have got more talent? I would argue yes. So I think West Ham are probably where they are. I think so. Yeah, I think across the board, not just attacking wise. I think from kind of bottom to top.
I think more balance to the talent in those teams. I would say in the like you say, across the board. But in terms of standout top internationals, West Ham have a few of those that I would argue are making them look better than they are. That are being the difference and sort of dragging everyone with them. Whereas you could argue that Everton and Liverpool maybe don't have the superstars in the same way, but have more consistency across the board that is kind of keeping them going. So I don't disagree, but I think West Ham being able to sort of rely on some shrewd acquisitions previously that are kind of keeping them there, but there will be a point when those players want to leave because they're not doing particularly well, and loads of teams would have them in a heartbeat. That's the issue they've got, really, in the you've got to feel like you're going somewhere, don't you, if you're a big player like that.
Suzy, I feel like we need some kind of breaking news stab. This comes live to you on the recording of the pod on Tuesday morning. Suzy Wrack, take it away. What's going on?
Chelsea's beige kit colour is guava ice.
Oh!
It is, according to the club website, a lighter shade of orange, which brings a clean, youthful and on-trend aesthetic.
Chris called it. It's on trend.
Guava.
It is on
That's
trend.
interesting. I didn't see it as kind of
light orange. It's not light orange, is it?
Do you think I need to paint my kitchen that colour if that's on trend?
I want you to paint your kitchen guava ice. Please go guava ice.
Yeah, guava ice.
Yeah, I mean, don't go beige. Beige is so old-fashioned now.
Yeah.
Not cobham cream. They missed the trick, frankly.
They did miss
Cobham
a trick.
cream, yeah.
And, grey is out. Grey is out, guava ice is in. Absolutely love it. Right, this is the latest from the Championship. And I say it every week, we are doing a Championship special, I promise. And I'm sorry we have to skirt over every week. Birmingham City beat Sunderland by a 1-0 to stay top of the league. Isabel Goodwin sent London City up to second. They beat Portsmouth by the same score. Drama at St Mary's, where Newcastle salvaged a point despite being 2-0 down against Southampton. Amy Andrews levelled in dramatic fashion in the 94th minute. And at Bramall Lane, Sheffield United held Durham to a draw, which could prove a vital point for the Blades if they want to avoid relegation. The other game that was scheduled, Charlton against Blackburn at the Valley, had to be called off for a frozen pitch about 30 minutes before kick-off, which, we discussed at the beginning of January when we had that cold snap, Emma, just isn't really acceptable. It's far too late in the day.
Yeah, it is too late in the day. And to be honest, I don't know the conditions of the pitch. I obviously didn't see it myself, but it does feel quite strange that we're kind of at the start of February and games are still getting cancelled. I think, this is just an issue across the board in women's football that just needs addressing. We can't be having games cancelled, 2 months into the year.
No. Indeed. Right, we've got some any other business because the trial of Luis Rubiales has begun in Spain. If you recognise that name, this is why. He's the former president of the Spanish Football Federation. He's accused of sexual assault and coercion over the unsolicited kiss he planted on player Jenny Hermoso during the World Cup final celebrations in 2023. Hermoso took to the stand on Monday, said that the kiss had stained one of the happiest days of her life. Rubiales eventually resigned as president, you'll remember, after initially describing the encounter as a consensual peck. He denies the charges. Staying in Spain, Barcelona players have spoken out about plans for the Women's Supercopa to be played in Saudi Arabia. The Spanish Football Federation has been in negotiations with the Saudis to extend their agreement to play the Men's Supercopa semi-finals and final away from Spain until at least 2034 and include the women's competition as well. Midfielder Patri Gallaro said, taking the Supercopa outside of Spain and to a country that doesn't respect women, I don't see it. Do you see it, Chris? I think I've got a feeling what you're going to say about this situation.
Well, firstly, I think it's what's really good is that you can sort of see that, and it's probably relating to some of the Rubiales stuff, is that the women from in the playing in Spain have really found their voice to be able to talk about this stuff with kind of confidence, which I think is terrific. And I totally understand that sort of solidarity with women in Saudi and stand up given the women's rights. But, and we talked about it at the top here, like, how do you reconcile that with that's where the money is? And if you're trying to continuously get, and that's what, I saw that in the articles about this, is like, what do you do when you want investment in the game and that's the only place where the investment is? It's a really tough one. And I also think that it just comes back to the basics of like, what about the fans? And if you've got a Spanish Super Cup, it shouldn't be anywhere but Spain. And that's not because, this isn't like planting a flag. There's not a Little England planting a flag, but it's like, that's where the fans are. You've got fans who kind of follow their teams all over, and then suddenly you take the game to a place where that isn't necessarily accessible. So I think it's really, really important that the cup stays in Spain, and it's really, really important that the women's players can come out and talk about it. But then we do also have to address where's the investment going to come from, because it's complex, right? But the fact is that, you are talking about a country where, women were only allowed to drive in 2020 in Saudi Arabia. So I think we need to be really careful about what it is that we're doing, but equally to not sort of, add our values to it, etc., and to say, OK, well, we can maybe hopefully drive some change, but I'm not sure this is going to do it. And I think the cup needs to stay in Spain, and it's good that they're speaking out. It's complex.
Yeah. LGBT rights are important as well,
yeah,
obviously,
absolutely.
within the conversation. Listen, in the spirit of this pod, which has been great fun, by the way, thank you so much. Let's end on a positive, shall we? Huge congratulations to Chelsea goalkeeper Zasira Musovic. She's announced that she's expecting her first baby, so she's going to miss the rest of the season. So congratulations to her. It's been a pleasure. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Chris, as always, lovely to hear from you. Lovely to
Great
see
to see you all.
Get to your rave. Is it lunchtime rave today?
Oh, every day's a rave, Faye.
That is true. Every day's a rave for Emma Sanders. I mean, she just barely leaves the house. She just sits there raving in her slippers on her sofa, barely working, no travel.
I know, I'm just going to be scrolling Instagram waiting for Musovic's baby to be wearing the beige kit. That's all I'm going to do now for the next 9 months.
Not beige, guava ice. Oh my goodness.
I just wanted you all to say it, that was all.
We did a breaking news on it, for goodness sake. Suzy Wrack, that's the kind of journalism I want to see every week from you.
That's really vital, isn't it?
Yeah, important for everybody. I will see you next week. See you all as well very soon. Keep having your say, send in your questions. Sorry we didn't get to any today. It was such a busy pod, wasn't it? But let us know via social media if you've got any questions. Email us at women'sfootballweekly@theguardian.com as well. And as ever, a reminder for you to sign up for our weekly women's football newsletter. All you need to do is search Moving the Goalposts, sign up. The Guardian Women's Football Weekly is produced by Sophie Downey and Silas Gray. Music composition was by Laura Iredale. Our executive producer is Sal Ahmat. Guava ice.
This is The Guardian.